Time is the most precious currency of life, and how you spend it shapes who you become. Carl Jung, with his deep understanding of the psyche, often warned about the dangers of giving your energy to the wrong people, those who drain, manipulate, or distract you from your true path of individuation. In this lecture, People Who Aren't Worth Your Time, 10 Types of People You Shouldn't Waste It On, we will explore how Jung's insights into human behavior and archetypes can help us discern which relationships elevate us and which ones slowly erode our inner strength. Jung believed that every encounter leaves an imprint on the soul, and that being careless with your associations often means sacrificing your authenticity. He saw toxic people as projections of unresolved shadows, tricksters that distort reality, or personas that mask deeper emptiness. When we fail to recognize these patterns, we risk losing ourselves, chasing approval, or becoming trapped in cycles of frustration. But when we learn to identify them, we reclaim our time, our energy, and our journey toward wholeness. This lecture will guide you through the psychological and spiritual wisdom behind setting boundaries and choosing wisely who deserves a seat at your table. We will uncover how protecting your time is not selfish, but essential for growth, creativity, and alignment with your true self. Carl Jung often emphasized that the relationships we cultivate are mirrors of our inner life. Yet not every mirror is worth gazing into. One of the most damaging dynamics that he warned about, both directly and indirectly, involves those who consistently drain our energy without ever giving anything in return. These are the individuals who leave you feeling emptier after every encounter, as if they have taken something vital from you and left behind a kind of heaviness. Jung's psychology helps us understand why these dynamics happen, how they affect the psyche, and why it is essential to set boundaries with such people if we want to protect the process of individuation and maintain our own vitality. To give endlessly without reciprocity is to risk losing touch with one's own self. And to waste time on those who constantly drain you is to stray from the deeper journey toward wholeness. Energy drainers often appear in subtle disguises. They are not always malicious or overtly toxic, but they consistently take more than they give. In Jungian terms, they might embody archetypal patterns such as the vampire, a symbol of the unconscious drive to consume the life force of others. Because one has not yet cultivated their own, they may show up as friends who always demand your listening ear but never make space for your struggles, family members who expect your constant sacrifice without gratitude, or colleagues who offload their responsibilities onto you while contributing little themselves. Each interaction becomes a transaction in which you are depleted, and they are temporarily satisfied. Jung's concept of psychic energy reminds us that our vitality is not infinite. It must be preserved and directed toward our growth. To allow others to continually siphon it away is to betray the self, the archetype of wholeness within, which calls us to nurture our own development. At the heart of this dynamic is the shadow. Energy-draining individuals often live unconsciously, projecting their shadow onto others. Instead of confronting their own insecurities, fears, or inadequacies, they lean on those around them to carry the burden. For example, someone who refuses to take responsibility for their failures may constantly seek reassurance, leaving you exhausted as you try to validate them. Another may project their inner chaos onto you, expecting you to clean up the mess they refuse to acknowledge. By doing so, they avoid the painful but necessary process of self-confrontation, while you are left carrying weight that does not belong to you. Jung would say that engaging with such people without awareness can entangle you in their unfinished psychological work, distracting you from your own individuation and leaving you spiritually impoverished. The danger of allowing energy drainers to dominate your time lies not only in fatigue but also in the gradual erosion of boundaries. Over time, you may begin to believe that your worth lies in serving, rescuing, or constantly being available to others. This belief is a distortion of the archetype of the caregiver, which in its healthy form is nurturing and life-giving, but in its distorted form becomes martyrdom. Jung observed that archetypes, when not consciously integrated, can possess the psyche, leading to compulsive patterns of behavior. The compulsion to give endlessly to those who drain you is one such possession, and it traps you in cycles where you neglect your own growth in service of others who never reciprocate. This pattern leads to resentment, bitterness, and exhaustion, none of which align with the path of individuation, which requires balanced self-respect and conscious use of energy. Jung's concept of individuation helps explain why it is so dangerous to waste time on those who constantly drain you. Individuation requires turning inward, exploring the unconscious, and integrating the shadow. It demands creativity, courage, and spiritual openness. These processes require psychic energy, and when that energy is continually depleted by external demands, the inner work becomes impossible. It is not selfish to preserve your energy, it is essential. Jung believed that the self, the central archetype of the psyche, guides us toward wholeness, but this guidance is subtle and requires attention. If you are exhausted from giving to others without return, you cannot hear the whispers of the self. You cannot dream deeply, reflect clearly, or create freely. Protecting yourself from energy-draining individuals is, therefore, an act of obedience to the self, a recognition that your journey is sacred and deserves safeguarding. That is also worth recognizing the archetypal patterns that make people susceptible to energy drain. Jung noted that many people carry wounds from childhood that leave them vulnerable to exploitation. Those who grew up in environments where love was conditional on sacrifice often internalize the belief that they must constantly give to earn affection. As adults, they unconsciously attract or tolerate relationships that replicate this dynamic. Energy drainers sense this willingness and take advantage of it, often without malice, but with a deep unconscious hunger to be cared for. Breaking free from this cycle requires confronting the inner child, healing the wounds of conditional love, and reclaiming the right to receive as much as one gives. Singleness or solitude often provides the perfect condition for this healing, because without the constant drain of unhealthy relationships, the individual has space to reflect, reframe, and restore their boundaries. The presence of energy-draining people also activates what Jung called complexes, clusters of emotionally charged thoughts and feelings that operate autonomously in the psyche. For example, being constantly used by others might trigger a savior complex, where you feel compelled to rescue and fix those around you. Alternatively, it may activate a guilt complex, where saying no feels unbearable because it stirs unconscious fears of rejection or abandonment. By engaging with energy drainers, you continually reinforce these complexes, keeping yourself trapped in cycles of exhaustion. Recognizing this pattern allows you to withdraw your energy and redirect it toward integration. Instead of being enslaved by a complex, you can become conscious of it, break the cycle, and reclaim the psychic energy needed for individuation. Energy drainers also threaten creativity, which Jung believed was a vital expression of the unconscious. Creativity requires spaciousness, silence, and focus. When you are constantly pouring your energy into others who never refill your cup, your creative well dries up. You become reactive rather than generative, consumed by the needs of others instead of inspired by your own inner visions. Many people find that when they distance themselves from draining relationships, their creativity blossoms, ideas flow, insights emerge, and new possibilities open. This is not coincidence, but the natural restoration of psychic energy. By refusing to waste time on energy drainers, you protect the conditions for creativity, which in turn nourishes your individuation and aligns you with the deeper purposes of your life. Jung also highlighted the spiritual cost of being surrounded by people who drain your energy. He often described the self as a divine image within, the spark of the transcendent that seeks expression in each life. To connect with this self requires vitality and openness, both of which are diminished when your energy is siphoned away. People who constantly take without giving often leave you feeling disconnected not only from yourself but also from the sacred dimension of life. You may find that your spiritual practices feel empty, your prayers lifeless, or your sense of meaning diminished. Protecting your time from such individuals is therefore not merely about psychological health but about spiritual survival. It allows you to restore your connection to the self and to the transcendent realities that give life depth and meaning. It is important to note that setting boundaries with energy-draining people does not mean abandoning compassion. Jung understood that many of these individuals are themselves unconscious, struggling with their shadows, and caught in patterns they do not seek, but compassion does not require sacrifice of the self. One can recognize their struggles without becoming their endless source of energy. True compassion sometimes means withdrawing, allowing the other to face their own shadow rather than enabling their avoidance. In this way, boundaries become not only an act of self-care but also a gift to the other, forcing them to confront what they have long evaded. By refusing to waste time on those who drain you, you preserve your own vitality while offering them the opportunity for growth. Ultimately, Jung would argue that life is too precious, and the journey of individuation too sacred, to be squandered on relationships that leave you depleted. Energy is the currency of the psyche, and it must be spent wisely. Every moment with someone who drains you is a moment stolen from your creativity, your clarity, your spiritual growth, and your alignment with the self. to protect your time and energy is to honor your deeper calling, to affirm that your life has purpose beyond being consumed by the needs of others. Those who constantly drain without giving are not worth your time, because your time belongs to something greater: the unfolding of your wholeness, the realization of yourself, and the fulfillment of your unique destiny. Carl Jung's exploration of human behavior reveals that one of the greatest dangers to an individual's psychological and spiritual growth lies in surrounding oneself with people who are manipulative, deceptive, or who live behind masks instead of showing authenticity. Jung was deeply concerned with the nature of the persona, the social mask every individual wears in order to adapt to collective norms and expectations. While the persona serves a necessary function, providing a means of relating to society, it becomes destructive when it hardens into a false identity. Those who live entirely in their personas, or worse, those who exploit them to manipulate others, are people who cannot meet you authentically. They entangle you in illusions, distort your perception of reality, and subtly drain your energy by forcing you to play roles within their dramas. To spend time on such individuals is to waste the precious psychic energy required for individuation. For in dealing with masks and manipulations, you are pulled away from the deeper work of discovering your true self. Manipulative and deceptive individuals thrive on control. Jung would describe them as people who are possessed by shadow elements they refuse to face within themselves, and who therefore project these qualities outward into their relationships. Their dishonesty is not merely about lying to others, but about living a lie themselves, refusing to integrate the split-off parts of their psyche. They may present themselves as charming, trustworthy, or altruistic, but beneath the mask lurks insecurity, envy, or hunger for power. They hide these aspects not only from others but from their own conscious awareness, thereby creating relationships that are built on illusion rather than authenticity. Jung's psychology makes clear that illusions, while initially alluring, always collapse under the weight of reality. But for as long as one engages with manipulative individuals, one becomes ensnared in their web of deception, losing clarity of vision and wasting valuable energy on untangling the lies. The mask, or persona, is not inherently negative. Jung understood its necessity for social adaptation. However, when people identify fully with their persona, they become hollow shells, disconnected from their inner life. Such individuals may appear polished, successful, or even virtuous, but their authenticity is absent. They perform roles: hero, victim, martyr, saint, but never reveal their deeper truth. This reliance on masks forces those around them to interact not with their real selves but with roles, leaving every encounter shallow and draining. Jung warned that over-identification with the persona leads to a kind of spiritual death, for it cuts off access to the unconscious and prevents individuation. When you spend time with people who live entirely through their personas, you are not in relationship with a real human being but with a projection, an image designed to conceal. To invest your time in such dynamics is to be caught in theater, where no real intimacy or growth can occur. Manipulators often use these masks strategically. They may adopt the mask of the helper to gain your trust, only to exploit your vulnerabilities later. They may wear the mask of the victim, drawing you into endless cycles of rescuing them, while refusing to take responsibility for their own growth. Others may wear the mask of superiority, projecting authority or wisdom to control those who seek guidance. Jung's concept of archetypes helps us recognize these patterns: the false hero, the false sage, the trickster in his destructive form. These figures play roles that are convincing but ultimately hollow, and they waste the time of those who engage with them, because they are not interested in truth but in maintaining their illusions. Engaging with them requires constant vigilance, for one must disentangle manipulation from reality, but this vigilance drains the psyche, leaving little energy for one's own journey. The psychological cost of dealing with manipulative or masked individuals is profound. They destabilize your trust in your own perceptions, gaslighting you into doubting what you see and feel. Jung emphasized the importance of listening to intuition, the subtle guidance of the unconscious that alerts us when something is amiss. Manipulative individuals thrive by silencing this intuition, making you question yourself until you become dependent on their version of reality. This dependency keeps you trapped, wasting time and energy in cycles of confusion. Jung's approach reminds us that to preserve our psychic health, we must honor our inner signals and recognize when someone's words and actions do not align. Authenticity is always congruent, but deception is fractured, and learning to trust this recognition is a vital part of individuation. Jung's analysis of the shadow is also crucial here. Manipulators project their shadow onto others, blaming and shaming those around them for qualities they refuse to acknowledge within themselves. They may accuse you of selfishness when they are the ones exploiting, or of dishonesty when they themselves are deceptive. This projection creates a toxic atmosphere where you are constantly on the defensive, drained by the effort to justify yourself. Worse, if you are not conscious of the dynamic, you may even internalize their projections, doubting yourself and carrying guilt that does not belong to you. Jung insisted that individuation requires taking back projections, refusing to carry what is not yours, and confronting the shadow within yourself. By disengaging from manipulative people, you allow them the chance to face their own shadows, while freeing yourself from the exhausting task of carrying them. Relationships with deceptive people also hinder creativity, which Jung saw as the psyche's natural expression of unconscious material. Creativity requires freedom, safety, and trust in one's own vision. Manipulators, however, often undermine this by sowing doubt or by co-opting your creative energy for their own purposes. They may belittle your ideas, subtly discourage your pursuits, or take credit for your insights. Over time, this erodes your confidence and silences your inner voice. Spending time with such individuals is therefore a direct assault on your creative potential. Jung believed that creativity was not optional but essential to individuation, for it allows unconscious material to emerge and be integrated. Protecting your creative space means protecting yourself from those who use manipulation to diminish your light. The spiritual cost of engaging with people who live behind masks is equally significant. Jung often equated the self, the archetype of wholeness, with the image of God within the psyche. Authentic relationships, he believed, are encounters not only between two egos but between two souls meeting in truth. When you interact with someone who refuses authenticity, who hides behind layers of deception, you are denied this sacred encounter. Instead of communion, you experience simulation. Instead of depth, you encounter surface. Over time, this can leave you spiritually starved, for the nourishment of the soul comes only through real connection. Jung would argue that protecting yourself from such relationships is not selfish but sacred. It preserves the possibility of genuine encounters, where two individuals meet as whole beings rather than as masks performing for each other. It is important to recognize that manipulative and masked individuals are not always consciously malicious. Many are trapped in their personas because they fear rejection if they reveal their true selves. Others manipulate unconsciously, driven by complexes or wounds they have not yet confronted. Jung emphasized compassion for the unconscious, recognizing that those who deceive are often deceiving themselves first. However, compassion does not mean tolerating exploitation. The task of individuation requires boundaries, discernment, and the courage to walk away from dynamics that waste your energy. By withdrawing from such relationships, you are not condemning the other but choosing to honor your own path. You allow them the opportunity to confront their own persona and shadow, while freeing yourself to pursue authenticity and wholeness. Jung's insights also remind us that masks can be seductive. Deceptive individuals often appear more appealing than authentic ones because their personas are polished, carefully curated to impress. They may project confidence, charm, or charisma, while hiding deep insecurities. It is easy to be drawn to these masks, mistaking performance for substance. But Jung warns that this allure is temporary, for the psyche always hungers for truth. Eventually, the hollowness of the mask reveals itself, leaving you disillusioned and drained. Recognizing this pattern early, trusting intuition, and choosing authenticity over appearances protects you from wasting years entangled in illusions. The true gold of human connection lies not in polish but in depth, not in performance but in vulnerability. Ultimately, Jung would say that people who manipulate, deceive, or live entirely behind masks are not worth your time because they keep you from the work of individuation. They distract you with illusions, drain you with projections, and prevent the soul-to-soul encounters that nourish the self. To waste time on them is to waste energy that could be spent on your own growth, your own creativity, and your own journey toward wholeness. Life is too short and the psyche too sacred to be squandered in theaters of deception. The task is not to fix or unmask others, but to protect your energy, to choose authenticity in yourself, and to surround yourself with those who meet you as you truly are. Carl Jung often taught that one of the most destructive dynamics in human relationships arises when others project their unresolved shadows onto us and blame us for them. This mechanism of projection, though unconscious, can distort reality to the point where you begin carrying responsibilities, guilt, or shame that never belonged to you in the first place. Jung described the shadow as all the aspects of ourselves that we deny, repress, or cannot accept, the anger, envy, selfishness, or even untapped strength and potential that we push into the unconscious. When people refuse to face their own shadow, they cast it outward, assigning it to those around them. Suddenly you become the selfish one, the untrustworthy one, the weak one, even though these qualities are actually unresolved within them. This process not only confuses the psyche but wastes your energy, because instead of investing time in your own individuation, you become entangled in someone else's projections. Spending time on people who project their shadows onto you is one of the most insidious ways to lose touch with your true self. Jung's theory of projection helps us see why this dynamic is so exhausting. Projection occurs because the unconscious seeks expression. What is denied internally does not disappear. It demands to be recognized. If the individual lacks the courage or awareness to face it within, the psyche pushes it outward. For example, someone who represses anger may constantly accuse others of hostility. Someone who hides envy may insist others are jealous of them. Someone who denies their own weaknesses may exaggerate flaws in those around them. By displacing their shadow, they avoid self-confrontation, but they also distort relationships, creating an atmosphere of blame and defensiveness. The person receiving the projection often feels destabilized, questioning their own integrity or worth. Over time, this erodes confidence, fosters resentment, and drains psychic energy, all because someone else refuses to face their inner truth. When you engage deeply with people who live through projection, you risk internalizing their distortions. Jung warned about this danger, because the psyche is highly impressionable. If someone close to you consistently accuses you of being selfish, lazy, or untrustworthy, even without evidence, you may unconsciously begin to identify with these labels. They settle into your psyche as complexes, autonomous emotional patterns that influence thought and behavior. You may find yourself overcompensating, striving endlessly to prove you are not what they accuse you of being. In doing so, you expend enormous energy on a shadow that is not yours, while neglecting the work of integrating your own. This is why projection is so destructive. It not only distorts relationships but also diverts you from your authentic path of growth. Jung believed that individuation required withdrawing projections, both our own and those placed on us. To withdraw projections means to recognize what belongs to you and what does not, and to refuse to carry another person's unconscious. People who project their shadows onto you are, in a sense, inviting you into their unfinished psychological work, but it is not your task to do it for them. By carrying their shadow, you enable their avoidance, and you drain your own vitality. Recognizing projection when it happens allows you to step back and say, "This is not mine to carry." This act of discernment is crucial to individuation, for it protects the integrity of your psyche and keeps your energy aligned with your own journey. Time spent with people who project relentlessly is time stolen from your own growth, because instead of walking your path, you are wandering in the labyrinth of theirs. Projection also obscures authenticity. When someone constantly blames you for their disowned qualities, the relationship becomes a hall of mirrors where nothing reflects truthfully. You are not seen for who you are, but for what they cannot accept in themselves. Jung observed that true intimacy requires vulnerability, honesty, and mutual recognition. Projection makes this impossible. Instead of dialogue, there is accusation. Instead of connection, there is distortion. Over time, this corrodes trust, because you realize you are not relating to the real person but to their shadow in disguise. Remaining in such dynamics wastes time and emotional energy because the foundation of authenticity is absent. Individuation demands truth, and relationships built on projection are inherently false. Jung's concept of the shadow also includes positive qualities, sometimes called the gold in the shadow. These are strengths and potentials that people repress because they do not fit their conscious self-image. For instance, a person who sees themselves as humble may repress ambition, or someone who identifies as rational may repress their intuition. These qualities too can be projected outward, leading them to envy or criticize in others what they cannot admit in themselves. Thus, you may find that someone belittles your creativity, not because creativity is bad, but because they have buried their own, or they may dismiss your confidence, not because it is arrogance, but because they have denied their own power. Being on the receiving end of such projections is draining, for instead of encouragement, you meet resistance, and instead of support, you encounter undermining. In such cases, the waste of time is not only emotional but existential. You are held back from expressing your true gifts because others cannot face theirs. Another aspect Jung emphasized is the tendency of projections to polarize relationships. When someone projects their shadow onto you, they often elevate themselves as the opposite. If they call you irresponsible, they cast themselves as responsible. If they label you selfish, they present themselves as selfless. This polarization creates rigid dynamics where roles are fixed and growth is impossible. You are trapped in defending yourself, while they are trapped in denial. The energy expended in these conflicts is immense, and it leads nowhere, because the real issue there, unresolved shadow, remains unaddressed. Jung understood that growth comes from integrating opposites, not projecting them outward. To waste time on people who project is to waste energy fighting battles that can never be won, because the battlefield itself is a mirage created by their unconscious. The cost of such dynamics is not only psychological but spiritual. Jung saw the self as the guiding center of the psyche, the inner image of God that seeks wholeness. Projections sever the connection to the self, because they trap individuals in illusions about others rather than in truth about themselves. When you are caught in someone else's projections, your own connection to the self can weaken, as you begin to doubt your inner guidance and lose touch with your intuition. Spiritual practices that would normally bring clarity, meditation, dream work, become clouded by the noise of accusations and distortions. Protecting yourself from such dynamics is therefore not merely self-care but a sacred act of preserving your alignment with the self. Time spent disentangling from projections is time stolen from the deeper task of union with the divine image. Within Jung's analysis of archetypes helps illuminate why some people project so compulsively. They may be dominated by archetypal figures such as the victim, who projects blame onto others to avoid responsibility, or the persecutor who casts others as weak or guilty to preserve a sense of power. These archetypes, when unconscious, act like masks that prevent individuation. Engaging with people trapped in them often pulls you into complementary roles, forcing you into dynamics that are not authentic. For example, if someone insists on being the victim, you may find yourself cast as the rescuer or the persecutor, roles that drain your energy and distort your identity. Recognizing these archetypal projections allows you to step out of the game, refusing to waste time on roles that do not belong to you. It is also important to understand the subtle ways projection operates in close relationships. Family, partners, or close friends may unconsciously use you as a canvas for their shadow. Because of intimacy, their projections may feel heavier, harder to resist. In these cases, discernment is especially crucial. Jung would advise looking for patterns. Do you consistently feel guilty, inadequate, or misunderstood around this person, despite acting in good faith? If so, projection is likely at work. Identifying the pattern allows you to reclaim your perspective and withdraw your energy. It also allows you to preserve compassion without being consumed, recognizing that their accusations reveal more about their inner struggles than about your reality. The work of individuation requires courage, and one of the hardest acts of courage is refusing to carry what does not belong to you. People who project their shadows onto you and blame you for them are asking you to shoulder their unconscious burdens, to live out the parts of themselves they cannot face. Jung would say that this is not your task. Your task is to face your own shadow, to integrate your own unconscious, and to move toward wholeness. Allowing others to offload their shadows onto you prevents both of you from growing. You are drained, and they remain in denial. The most loving and life-affirming choice is to step away, to withdraw your time and energy, and to honor your own journey. In doing so, you not only protect yourself but also give them the opportunity to confront their own reflection, which is the only path to true transformation. Carl Jung's insights into human psychology revealed that few influences are more corrosive to the soul than surrounding oneself with people who dismiss growth, belittle dreams, or undermine individuality out of envy or fear. These individuals may not always appear openly hostile. Often their dismissiveness is subtle, hidden in small comments, raised eyebrows, or constant negativity. Yet the effect is profound, for they chip away at confidence, plant seeds of doubt, and keep others tethered to limitations. Jung believed that individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires the courage to pursue one's unique path, to listen to the self rather than to the collective, and to honor the inner call to transformation. When you spend time with people who fear change or envy progress, you place yourself in an atmosphere that resists individuation, one that stifles potential rather than nurturing it. Dismissiveness of growth often comes from those who have not pursued their own. Jung noted that when people fail to integrate their unconscious, they become trapped in cycles of fear, envy, and projection. Instead of confronting their own stagnation, they attack or ridicule the growth they see in others. It is easier for them to pull you down than to face the painful reality of their unfulfilled potential. Such individuals may say things like, "You're dreaming too big, that's unrealistic," or "Why can't you just be satisfied?" These statements may sound practical on the surface, but they are deeply rooted in the speaker's own fear of change. To engage with them without discernment is to risk internalizing their limitations, mistaking their fear for your own reality, and abandoning the call of yourself in order to conform to their comfort zone. Jung's concept of the shadow helps us understand why envy is so destructive in relationships. Envy arises when someone sees in another the very qualities or achievements they have denied in themselves. Instead of recognizing these qualities as reflections of their own potential, they react with resentment. Envious individuals may never say outright that they are jealous, but their behavior gives them away: subtle discouragement, lack of support, or even passive-aggressive sabotage. Jung would argue that this envy is an unacknowledged shadow, a projection of their disowned potential. When you are on the receiving end of such envy, you may feel guilty for succeeding or hesitant to pursue your dreams fully, because doing so threatens the fragile self-image of those around you. This dynamic is profoundly draining, for instead of celebrating your individuality, you are pressured to dim your light to protect the comfort of others. Fear plays a similar role. People who are afraid of their own growth often react with hostility to the growth of others. Jung taught that transformation always carries the risk of uncertainty, for it requires leaving behind the old persona and stepping into the unknown. Those who refuse this risk cling to stability, even if it means stagnation. When they see someone else pursuing growth, they experience it as a threat, a reminder of what they themselves have not dared to attempt. Their fear translates into discouragement, warning, or criticism, designed to keep you from moving forward. But Jung insisted that individuation demands the courage to walk one's own path, regardless of collective fears. To waste time on people who are governed by fear is to allow their avoidance to infect your own psyche, paralyzing you with doubts that are not yours to carry. Jung's idea of the persona sheds further light on why dismissive individuals are so harmful. Many of them are overly identified with social roles and external approval. They measure success not by authenticity but by conformity to societal expectations. When you pursue growth that challenges these norms, whether through creativity, spiritual exploration, or personal transformation, they feel threatened, because your individuality exposes the hollowness of their persona. Instead of encouraging your authenticity, they urge you to return to the collective mask. They may accuse you of being selfish, strange, or unrealistic, but what they truly mean is that your authenticity unsettles their false identity. Engaging with such individuals drains your energy, for you are constantly defending your right to be yourself. Jung would say that individuation requires stepping beyond the persona, and this is only possible when you refuse to let others imprison you in theirs. Another danger lies in the way dismissive people distort your inner dialogue. When you are repeatedly told that your dreams are foolish or that your individuality is inconvenient, these messages seep into the unconscious. Jung described complexes as emotionally charged patterns of thought and behavior that operate autonomously in the psyche. Over time, the dismissive voices of others can form complexes within you, replaying as inner critics that sabotage your efforts. You may find yourself hesitating before taking risks, hearing echoes of their discouragement in your mind. This is how dismissive relationships waste your time. Not only do they discourage you in the present, but they implant psychological barriers that persist long after the person is gone. Breaking free from these complexes requires conscious effort, to recognize that these voices are not your own, but the projections of others who could not face their own fears. Creativity, which Jung saw as a direct expression of the unconscious, is especially vulnerable in the presence of dismissive people. Creativity requires openness, vulnerability, and freedom to explore without fear of judgment. When you are surrounded by people who scoff at your ideas, minimize your achievements, or mock your individuality, your creative impulse retreats into the shadows. You may censor yourself, abandon projects, or lose touch with inspiration altogether. Jung believed that creativity was essential for individuation, because it allows unconscious material to surface and be integrated. To waste time with those who dismiss creativity is to starve the soul of one of its most vital expressions. Protecting your creative spirit means choosing relationships that nurture, not diminish, your individuality. Spiritual growth is equally at risk. Jung often spoke of the self as the inner guide, the archetype of wholeness that calls each person toward their unique path. Responding to this call often means breaking with collective norms and following a path that others may not understand. Dismissive people, governed by envy or fear, resist this spiritual journey because it threatens the stability of the collective. They may label your search for meaning as impractical, unnecessary, or even foolish. Yet Jung insisted that the call of the self cannot be silenced without consequence. Ignoring it leads to emptiness, neurosis, and despair. To spend time with those who undermine your spiritual growth is to betray the self, for it means choosing comfort over authenticity. Protecting your time from such people is not arrogance, but reverence for the sacred journey unfolding within you. Jung's idea of synchronicity, the meaningful coincidences that guide us, also reveals why dismissive relationships are so damaging. When you are aligned with the self, life often presents signs, opportunities, and connections that confirm your path. But dismissive people cloud your perception of these signs. Their negativity makes you second-guess the meaning of dismissing them as coincidence or delusion. In doing so, they weaken your trust in the unconscious and in the deeper order of life. Over time, this erodes your confidence in the mysterious guidance that individuation requires. To remain around such individuals is to risk losing sight of the very forces that guide you toward your destiny. Jung's recognition of archetypes also helps explain why dismissive people feel so threatening. They may embody archetypes like the skeptic, the cynic, or the saboteur. While these archetypes have a role in balancing naivety, they become destructive when they dominate, suffocating inspiration and growth. Being in the presence of someone dominated by these archetypes feels like walking into a fog, where every idea is dimmed, every dream is questioned, every step forward is resisted. This archetypal influence can be contagious, for archetypes operate not only within individuals but within groups, shaping collective moods. Spending time with dismissive individuals risks being drawn into these archetypal fields, where cynicism and fear replace curiosity and courage. It is important to acknowledge that those who dismiss growth are often unconscious of their behavior. They may believe they are being practical, realistic, or protective, not realizing that their words stem from envy or fear. Jung emphasized compassion for the unconscious, but compassion does not require participation. Recognizing their limitations allows you to respond without hostility, but also without entanglement. The most compassionate act may be to step away, to preserve your own energy for growth rather than wasting it on convincing those who cannot yet see. By doing so, you honor both your journey and theirs, allowing them the space to confront their own shadow in their own time. Ultimately, Jung would insist that people who dismiss your growth, dreams, or individuality are not worth your time because they oppose the central task of life, individuation. Their envy, fear, and resistance keep you tethered to the collective. When the self calls you to transcend it, they waste not only hours of your life but the deeper vitality of your psyche, siphoning energy that should be devoted to creativity, clarity, and spiritual awakening. To protect your time from them is to affirm your commitment to becoming whole, to living authentically, and to honoring the unique path carved by your soul. It is not cruelty but necessity, for only by guarding your individuality against dismissive influences can you walk the path Jung believed every human being is destined to take. Carl Jung observed that there are individuals who thrive on conflict, drama, and perpetual negativity, and that these types of people are among the most dangerous to one's psychological and spiritual development. Their presence creates an atmosphere in which peace is constantly disrupted, energy is continuously drained, and clarity is clouded by turbulence. Jung's psychology helps us understand why such people operate the way they do, and why it is essential to avoid wasting time on them. Conflict-driven personalities are often unconsciously ruled by their own shadow, unable to confront their inner turmoil, so they externalize it, manufacturing chaos around them. They need drama to feel alive because silence and stillness would force them to face themselves. For those committed to individuation, the process of becoming whole and authentic, these people represent a detour into endless distraction, pulling energy away from the work of self-discovery and into battles that can never truly be won. The craving for conflict can be seen as a manifestation of unintegrated shadow material. Jung believed that the shadow contains not only repressed desires and fears, but also intense emotions that a person cannot consciously process. When someone refuses to face these emotions inwardly, they look for outlets in the external world. Conflict becomes their way of discharging inner tension. Instead of acknowledging their anger, fear, or insecurity, they stir these feelings in others. They pick fights, provoke arguments, or exaggerate issues until they create a storm. This drama serves as a distraction, keeping them from the harder work of introspection. When you are drawn into their chaos, you become an actor in their unconscious theater, wasting your time and energy on battles that have nothing to do with your own growth. Jung would insist that individuation requires withdrawing from such dynamics, for they prevent the silence and stillness in which the self can speak. Negativity operates in a similar way. Those who thrive on negativity often see the world through a distorted lens shaped by their unexamined shadow. They focus obsessively on what is wrong, what is failing, and what is hopeless, because to acknowledge possibility or beauty would require them to face their own responsibility for transformation. They dismiss hope as naivete, joy as foolishness, and growth as unrealistic. In Jungian terms, they are projecting their own despair onto the world, refusing to see that what they interpret as external failure is often a reflection of their own inner stagnation. Being around such people can feel suffocating. Their negativity seeps into your psyche, subtly convincing you that your dreams are unattainable, your efforts futile, and your individuality meaningless. This influence can implant complexes that replay as inner critics, sabotaging your progress long after the person is gone. To waste time on these dynamics is to allow your unconscious to be colonized by someone else's unresolved despair. Drama-driven individuals are often possessed by archetypal forces, particularly the trickster in its destructive form. The trickster archetype, when unconscious, thrives on destabilization, mischief, and chaos. It does not create for the sake of transformation but disrupts for the sake of disruption. Jung emphasized that archetypes are powerful, autonomous forces within the psyche, and when someone is dominated by them, they act compulsively. Those who embody the negative trickster archetype cannot resist stirring up trouble, creating conflict where none exists, or spreading rumors that ignite division. They feel energized by the chaos they create, while those around them are left drained, confused, and burdened. Engaging with them wastes time because you cannot reason with an archetype that is being lived out unconsciously. The only solution is to recognize the pattern and withdraw, preserving your energy for your own individuation rather than becoming a pawn in someone else's archetypal drama. The need for conflict and drama is also tied to the ego's resistance to the unconscious. Jung observed that when the ego resists integration, it often distracts itself with external battles to avoid inner confrontation. People who thrive on drama are, in many ways, terrified of silence, because silence would force them to encounter their shadow. By constantly generating noise, they keep themselves and those around them from looking inward. If you remain entangled with them, you too are drawn away from your inner work. Your dreams may become clouded, your intuition drowned out, and your creativity stifled by the constant turbulence. Individuation requires energy, focus, and openness to the unconscious. Chaos-driven people rob you of these resources, leaving you exhausted and fragmented. Another danger lies in the contagion of negativity. Jung emphasized that archetypes and psychic energies are not confined to individuals but move collectively, influencing groups and relationships. Spending time with someone who thrives on negativity is not a neutral act. Their worldview begins to infiltrate your own psyche. Slowly you may find yourself adopting their cynicism, expecting failure, or doubting the possibility of growth. This psychic contagion is subtle but powerful, for the unconscious absorbs the moods and attitudes of those around us. Protecting yourself from drama-driven people is therefore not merely about avoiding annoyance, but about preserving the purity of your own psyche. To waste time in their presence is to risk absorbing their unresolved shadow and mistaking it for your own truth. Jung's concept of complexes further illuminates why conflict-driven people are so harmful. Complexes are emotionally charged patterns that hijack behavior, and those who thrive on drama often seek to trigger these complexes in others. They may know, consciously or unconsciously, how to push your buttons, reminding you of old wounds, stirring guilt, or activating insecurity. Once triggered, you find yourself reacting intensely, as if controlled by something beyond your conscious will. This reaction drains your energy and keeps you entangled in their cycle of conflict. The more time you spend with them, the more entrenched these complexes become, until you are living more in reaction to them than in pursuit of your own individuation. Recognizing this manipulation allows you to step back and refuse to participate. Protecting your psyche from unnecessary battles. From a spiritual perspective, people who thrive on conflict and drama cut you off from the deeper connection to the self. Jung saw the self as the divine center of the psyche, guiding each person toward wholeness and meaning. To hear its guidance requires inner stillness, openness, and trust in the unconscious. Chaos-driven individuals disrupt this stillness with constant noise, keeping you trapped on the surface of life. They pull you away from the sacred depths of your soul into shallow arguments and trivial conflicts. Over time, this not only wastes energy but erodes your connection to meaning itself. You may begin to feel spiritually empty, disconnected from your purpose, because your energy is consumed by battles that do not matter. Protecting yourself from these dynamics is therefore not only psychological but spiritual self-preservation, an affirmation that your life is meant for depth, not distraction. Jung's archetype of the warrior also provides insight here. The healthy warrior protects boundaries, pursues justice, and fights for authenticity. But when entangled with conflict-driven people, the warrior archetype becomes distorted. You find yourself fighting endless, meaningless battles, defending yourself against accusations, or trying to resolve conflicts that cannot be resolved. This misuse of the warrior archetype drains your strength, leaving you weary and disillusioned. Individuation requires channeling the warrior toward inner battles, the confrontation with shadow, the integration of opposites, not toward external skirmishes manufactured by those who refuse to face themselves. Recognizing when your warrior energy is being misdirected is crucial to reclaiming your time and vitality. It is also essential to acknowledge that those who thrive on drama are often deeply unconscious of their behavior. They may not realize that they are driven by unresolved shadow material, or that their chaos is a defense against inner emptiness. Jung urged compassion for the unconscious, but compassion does not mean entanglement. One can understand why someone stirs conflict, while refusing to participate in it. The most compassionate act may be to withdraw, allowing them to confront their own inner storm rather than providing them with an endless outlet for projection. By stepping away, you not only protect your energy but also give them the opportunity, however painful, to face themselves. The allure of drama can be powerful, especially for those who are unconsciously drawn to intensity as a substitute for meaning. Jung warned that when individuals lack connection to the self, they often seek stimulation externally, mistaking conflict for vitality. This can make drama-driven people magnetic, for their chaos feels exciting in the short term, but excitement is not the same as meaning. Over time, their presence reveals itself to be hollow, leaving you drained rather than fulfilled. The individuation process requires distinguishing between authentic vitality, which arises from alignment with the self, and false intensity, which arises from chaos. Protecting yourself from the latter ensures that your energy is devoted to genuine growth rather than wasted on illusion. Ultimately, Jung would insist that people who thrive on conflict, drama, and negativity are not worth your time because they pull you away from the central task of life. They keep you locked in cycles of reaction rather than reflection, chaos rather than creativity, conflict rather than wholeness. They distract you from your shadow instead of encouraging you to face it, and they block you from hearing the quiet voice of the self. Every hour spent entangled in their turbulence is an hour stolen from your individuation, your creativity, and your spiritual growth. The work of becoming whole requires energy, focus, and courage, and these are precisely the resources consumed by drama-driven relationships. To step away from such dynamics is to affirm your commitment to authenticity, to protect the sacred journey of your soul, and to refuse to waste your life in battles that serve only the unconscious avoidance of others.